Hello everyone, welcome again to our academy. We are continuing our course How to Think Logically, and we will start talking about judgment. Thinking includes understanding and judgment. Understanding needs definition, judgment needs evidence. Both of them are made of matter and form. The matter that is used in definitions includes essentials and accidentals. The form of the definition is to start by the general or broad term and moves towards the more specific ones. A limiting definition uses essentials. A descriptive one uses accidentals. We will start talking about judgment, but first, let's talk a little about ignorance. Now we can realize that we have two different types of intellectual knowledge, understanding and judgment. So, there are two types of ignorance. Ignorance in understanding and in judgment. If you can't understand something at all and you have no idea about it, this is called simple ignorance in understanding. But if you understand it wrong, this is called complex ignorance in understanding. It's called complex because you don't know that you don't know. If you can't judge something at all, this is called simple ignorance in judgment. If you judge it wrong, this is called complex ignorance in judgment. For example, if someone has no idea about what iron is or what magnesium is, he doesn't understand them at all. This is simple ignorance in understanding. But if someone thinks that iron or magnesium is some sort of paper, this is complex ignorance in understanding. If someone can't judge that iron expands by heat or not, so this is a simple ignorance in judgment. But if he judges that iron doesn't expand by heating, this is complex ignorance in judgment. So let's start talking about judgment. As we have realized before, we understand concepts like justice, freedom, the human being, and so on. But we judge propositions like iron expands by heating, justice is good, and so on. Let's look at these different propositions. I am talking to you now from my house. Can you judge this proposition? Is it right or is it wrong? Of course, you don't know. You can't judge. You have simple ignorance in judgment here. For you, there is a 50% possibility that I am in my house and a 50% possibility that I am not in my house. This is called doubt. In doubt, there is no judgment. Let's look at this different proposition. Do you exist? Do you exist? Of course you exist. And you judge that you exist. And you are 100% sure that you exist. This is judgment. This is a certain judgment or certainty. Another proposition. If there work tomorrow, you may say yes, there is a great probability that there is work tomorrow. But of course, there is still a possibility that something will happen and the work will be cancelled. Even if it's a tiny possibility. So, here you judge, but you are not 100% sure. This is called uncertainty or uncertain judgment. So, you may not judge or have no judgment. This is simple ignorance, and this is called doubt. And you may judge, and when you judge, you may be 100% sure or certain. This is a certain judgment or certainty. And you may not be 100% sure or certain. This is uncertainty or an uncertain judgment. Does certainty means that the judgment must be right? Of course not. Someone may be certain and 100% sure that this is a sunset, and he may be wrong. This is complex ignorance. Someone may think this is a sunset, and he is 100% sure and certain, and he may be right. And if you ask him, what's your evidence? He may say, I just feel like it. So he doesn't have a proper evidence. Or he may say, I used my telescope and the compass, and I am sure this is a sunset. So he has a proper evidence. So, for someone to be certain doesn't mean that he is right. And for someone to be right doesn't mean that he has a proper evidence. The best judgment is a certain judgment, which is right, and it depends on a proper evidence. We have realized the difference between simple ignorance and complex ignorance in judgment. Let's look at this example. If we come by this collapsed man, and both of us don't know anything about medicine, you may have simple ignorance, so you will call for help because you know that you don't know. I may try something like giving him an ice cream because I think that ice cream is good for collapsed people, and I'm not going to call for help. This is complex ignorance. I don't know that I don't know. Complex ignorance is much more dangerous and harmful, and it prevents us from calling for help and from learning new information. So, wrong judgment is much more dangerous than doubt. So the best judgment is a certain, right, and based on a proper evidence. If someone thinks that and judges that love is the most important thing in marriage, he is not certain about this, and he builds his entire life on this judgment. After marriage, he may discover that there is nothing in common between him and his life partner, and his marriage may collapse. A businessman may think that not giving the workers their right will grow his industry. This is a wrong judgment, and it will lead to great failure. Someone who may judge that honesty is good, but he doesn't have a proper evidence. He is just repeating what he has previously heard. So in a certain situation, when honesty may lead to some losses for him, he may change his judgment and his belief. That is different from someone who has a certain right judgment based on a proper evidence that the universe is organized. He has studied it well. This judgment will never change because it's based on a proper and the right evidence. That's why we will study in details how to build a proper evidence. So, what to use? Must we have certain right judgment based on a proper evidence in each single detail in our lives? No, that's impossible. We must have this type of judgment in the most important principles we build our life on. For example, is it important to work? Of course it's important. This is a general principle. We must have a certain right judgment based on a proper evidence in this type of judgments. But let's look at this different example. Is working in agriculture is the best job for me? This is a personal application of this general principle. You may not be able to be certain that agriculture is the best for you. You didn't try everything else. So, you have an uncertain judgment. You only want to make the judgment as strong as you can. to increase the probability that it's right. That's all. This is how we do everything in our life. You can't be certain about everything, but you must be certain about the most important stuff. Another example. Is marriage important? And is this person the best partner for me? The first one is a general principle. You must have a certain right judgment based on a proper evidence in this one. But in the second one, this is a personal application. You may not be able to have a certain judgment in this one, but you must try as hard as you can to make your judgment strong. Is there a God? Should I worship God in this particular moment? The first one is the general principle. You must have a certain right judgment based on a proper evidence in this one. The second one is a personal application. You may not be able to have a certain answer, but you have to try to have a strong judgment as long as you can. We have learned that doubt is not judging. It's a simple ignorance in judgment. Judgment may be certain and may be uncertain. Certain judgments may be right and may be wrong. Right certain judgments may be based in a proper evidence and may be based on an improper evidence. The best judgment is a judgment which is certain, right, and based on a proper evidence. We must have this kind of judgment in the general important principles we build our life on. We may use uncertain judgments in the personal application of these principles, but we must try as hard as we can to make these judgments as strong as it's possible. We also have learned that there are two types of ignorance: ignorance in understanding and ignorance in judgment. Both of them may be simple and may be complex. Simple ignorance in the understanding means that you have no idea about the concept or the thing you are dealing with. Complex ignorance in understanding means that you have a wrong idea or a wrong understanding about this thing. Simple ignorance in judgment means that you are in doubt. You can't judge. Complex ignorance in judgment means that you have a wrong judgment. We have also known that wrong ignorance is much more worse than simple ignorance. You don't know that you don't know. You may harm yourself and others. You will not ask for knowledge. You will not try to learn something new, so you will remain ignorant. So it's important to question our understanding and our judgment, and to make sure that they are right and based on proper data. Thank you.